The salesman laughed when he asked about the $300,000 Lamborghini. "Maybe you should try the used car lot down the street," he suggested. 5 minutes later, that same salesman would be begging for his job. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to support more stories that remind us never to judge a book by its cover. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine lot of Prestige Motors, Beverly Hills, where rows of gleaming supercars sat like precious jewels under the California sky. Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, Bugatti, names that represented the pinnacle of automotive excellence and commanded prices that most people couldn't imagine spending on a house, let alone a car. Tommy Rodriguez pulled his battered 1998 Ford pickup truck into the visitor parking area, the engine coughing slightly as he turned off the ignition. At 38, Tommy bore the unmistakable marks of someone who worked with his hands, calloused fingers, grease-stained fingernails that no amount of scrubbing could completely clean, and the faint aroma of motor oil that seemed permanently woven into his clothes. He had been working since 4 a.m. that morning, finishing up an emergency repair on a city bus that had broken down during rush hour. His coveralls were dirty, his hair was disheveled, and his steel-toed work boots had seen better days. But none of that mattered to Tommy. Today was special. Today he was finally going to buy his dream car. Tommy stepped out of his truck and stood for a moment, taking in the sight of the luxury dealership. The building itself was a work of art, floor-to-ceiling glass windows, minimalist architecture, and an interior that looked more like a modern art gallery than a car lot. Through the windows, he could see the cars he had dreamed about since he was a boy working in his father's garage. As he walked toward the entrance, Tommy pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Hey, Dad," he said when the call connected. "I'm here, I'm actually here." The voice on the other end was warm and proud. "Tommy, you've earned this, son. Your mother and I are so proud of what you've built." Tommy smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. 20 years ago, he had started with nothing but a high school diploma and a passion for engines. He had worked double shifts, saved every penny, invested wisely, and built Rodriguez Auto Solutions from a single-bay garage into the largest fleet maintenance company in Southern California. His business now serviced city buses, delivery trucks, and commercial vehicles across 3 counties. Tommy employed 47 people, owned 6 facilities, and had just signed a 10-year contract with the city of Los Angeles that would set him up for life. But he still got his hands dirty every day, still worked on engines, and still wore the same coveralls he had worn when he was struggling to make rent. "I still can't believe I'm doing this," Tommy said to his father. "A Lamborghini Huracan. Remember when we used to look at pictures of these in magazines?" "I remember," his father replied. "And I remember telling you that if you worked hard enough, anything was possible. Go show them what the Rodriguez family is made of." Tommy ended the call and approached the dealership entrance. The glass doors slid open automatically, revealing an interior that was even more impressive than it had appeared from outside. The floors were polished marble, the lighting was sophisticated and dramatic, and classical music played softly in the background. But it was the cars that took his breath away. A bright yellow Lamborghini Huracan sat in the center of the showroom like a piece of sculpture, its lines perfect, its presence commanding. This was the car. This was what he had been working toward for 20 years. As Tommy stood admiring the vehicle, he became aware that he was drawing attention from the dealership staff. A young salesman in an expensive suit was whispering to a colleague near the reception desk, both of them glancing in his direction. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disapproval. The whispers weren't as quiet as they thought they were. Tommy caught fragments of their conversation. "Doesn't look like he belongs here. Probably just looking, waste of time." Tommy had faced this kind of judgment before. When you worked with your hands for a living, people made assumptions. They saw the grease under your fingernails and decided they knew your worth. But Tommy had learned long ago that the best response to prejudice was success, and today he was going to demonstrate just how successful he had become. A tall, impeccably dressed salesman finally approached, his smile professional but cold. The nameplate on his suit jacket read, "Bradley Kingsman, Senior Sales Associate." Everything about Bradley screamed privilege, from his perfectly styled hair to his designer watch to his condescending tone. "Good morning, sir," Bradley said, managing to make the word "sir" sound somehow insulting. "I'm Bradley. Is there something I can help you find today?" "I'd like to look at the Huracan," Tommy said simply, gesturing toward the yellow supercar. Bradley's smile became even more forced. "The Huracan? That's a very expensive vehicle. The model you're looking at starts at $298,000, and with the options package we're looking at closer to $340,000. Tommy nodded. I understand. Could I see the interior? Bradley hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Well, I suppose we could arrange a viewing, but I should mention that we do require proof of financing before we allow test drives or detailed inspections. These cars are quite exclusive. The implication was clear. Tommy didn't look like someone who could afford a car that cost more than most people's houses, but Tommy remained patient. He had dealt with prejudice before, and he knew that sometimes the best education came through experience. That's fine, Tommy said. I'd like to start with the interior, if that's possible. Bradley glanced around the showroom, clearly hoping one of his colleagues would take over. When no rescue appeared, he reluctantly led Tommy to the Lamborghini. Other customers in the showroom, well-dressed men and women who looked like they belonged in this environment, watched with interest as the grease-stained mechanic approached the $250,000 supercar. Now please be careful not to touch anything, Bradley said as he opened the driver's door. The leather is quite delicate, and any stains would be problematic. Tommy looked at his hands, then at Bradley. I understand your concern. I work on engines all day, but I do know how to be careful with expensive equipment. Bradley's expression suggested he had serious doubts about that claim. Of course. Well, as you can see, the interior is crafted from the finest Italian leather, with carbon fiber accents, and as Bradley launched into his sales pitch, Tommy listened politely while examining every detail of the car's interior. This wasn't just window shopping for him. He was genuinely evaluating the vehicle, asking technical questions about the engine specifications, the transmission, the suspension system. You seem to know quite a bit about cars, Bradley said, sounding surprised. I've been working on them most of my life, Tommy replied. Started in my father's garage when I was 12. Oh, so you're in the automotive business too, Bradley said, his tone becoming slightly less condescending. What do you do? Oil changes? Tire rotations? Tommy could have corrected him right then. He could have explained that he owned the largest commercial vehicle maintenance company in the region, that his annual revenue exceeded $15 million, that he employed nearly 50 people, but something in Bradley's tone, the casual dismissal, the assumption that because Tommy was dirty, he must be doing menial work, made him decide to wait a little longer. Something like that, Tommy said simply. Bradley nodded, his brief moment of interest fading. Well, I'm sure you can appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into a vehicle like this. Of course, the price point puts it out of reach for most people in the service industry. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Tommy looked at Bradley for a long moment, then at the car, then back at Bradley. Actually, Tommy said quietly, I'd like to buy it. Bradley blinked, certain he had misheard. I'm sorry? I'd like to buy the car. This one, today. Bradley's professional smile faltered completely. He glanced around the showroom, as if looking for someone to share the joke. Mr. I'm sorry, I don't think I caught your name. Rodriguez. Tommy Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, this car cost $340,000. By now, the conversation had attracted the attention of other salespeople and customers. A small crowd was beginning to form at a respectful distance, watching the interaction between the well-dressed salesman and the grease-stained mechanic who was claiming he wanted to buy $250,000 worth of Italian engineering. Bradley was clearly flustered. This wasn't a situation he had encountered before. In his 5 years at Prestige Motors, he had sold cars to celebrities, tech executives, real estate moguls, and investment bankers. But he had never had someone who looked like they had just crawled out from under a car claim they wanted to make a six-figure purchase. Mr. Rodriguez, Bradley said carefully, perhaps we should discuss financing options. We work with several banks that specialize in luxury vehicle loans, though I should mention that the qualification requirements are quite stringent. Tommy reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet, a worn leather bifold that had seen better days. Bradley's expression grew more skeptical as he watched Tommy fumble through what appeared to be a collection of business cards and receipts. Actually, Tommy said, I was hoping to pay cash. The words landed like a bomb in the elegant showroom. Bradley's mouth opened and closed without sound. The other customers who had been watching the interaction began to murmur among themselves. Even the classical music seemed to pause in anticipation. Bradley finally found his voice. Cash, Mr. Rodriguez, this car costs $340,000. I understand, Tommy said patiently. I've been saving up for this for a long time. Bradley looked around desperately, clearly hoping his manager would intervene. When no help appeared, he tried a different approach. Mr. Rodriguez, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but have you considered perhaps starting with something more attainable? We have some lovely certified pre-owned vehicles that might be more suitable for someone in your line of work." The condescension in his voice was unmistakable now. Tommy felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same anger he had felt as a young man when teachers told him he wasn't college material, when bank officers treated him like he was asking for charity, when people assumed that because he worked with his hands, he must not be smart enough for anything else. But Tommy had learned to channel that anger into motivation. Instead of responding in kind, he smiled. "Bradley," he said quietly, "why don't you call your manager over here?" Bradley's face went pale. "Mr. Rodriguez, if I've said something to offend you, just call your manager." Bradley hesitated for another moment, then walked quickly toward the back of the showroom. Tommy could see him having an animated conversation with a woman in her 50s who appeared to be in charge. She looked over at Tommy, then back at Bradley, her expression growing more serious as Bradley explained the situation. While he waited, Tommy took out his phone and made another call. "Maria," he said when his secretary answered, "I need you to call our bank and have them prepare a cashier's check for $350,000. "Yes, I know it's a lot. Just tell them it's for the car we discussed. They'll understand." The woman who appeared to be the manager approached, with Bradley trailing behind her like a nervous apprentice. She was impeccably dressed and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had dealt with difficult situations before. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Patricia Whitman, the general manager here at Prestige Motors. Bradley tells me you're interested in purchasing the Huracan." Tommy shook her hand, noting that she didn't seem to mind the calluses or the faint trace of motor oil. "That's correct." Patricia nodded professionally. "It's a beautiful vehicle, one of our most popular models. Bradley mentioned that you'd like to pay cash." "That's right." Patricia glanced at Bradley, then back at Tommy. "Mr. Rodriguez, I hope you'll forgive me for being direct, but a purchase of this magnitude requires certain verifications. We need to ensure that all funds are legitimate and properly documented." Tommy appreciated her directness. At least she was treating him with respect, even if she had doubts about his ability to complete the purchase. "Of course," he said. "What do you need from me?" Patricia seemed surprised by his cooperation. "Well, we'll need proof of income, banking information, identification." Tommy reached into his wallet and pulled out his driver's license, several business cards, and a folded piece of paper. He handed the business cards to Patricia first. "Rodriguez Auto Solutions," she read aloud, "commercial vehicle maintenance and fleet services." She looked up at Tommy with new interest. "This is your company?" "That's right. We service commercial vehicles throughout Southern California." Patricia examined the business card more carefully, noting the professional design and the multiple phone numbers. "How long have you been in business?" 20 years. "We started small, but we've grown quite a bit." Patricia looked at the folded piece of paper Tommy had given her. As she unfolded it, her expression changed dramatically. It was a bank statement from Wells Fargo Commercial Banking, showing an account balance of $2.3 million. The showroom fell silent as Patricia stared at the document. Bradley craned his neck to see what had caused such a reaction, and when he glimpsed the numbers, his face went white. "Mr. Rodriguez," Patricia said quietly, "I believe we owe you an apology." Tommy shrugged. "People make assumptions. It happens." But Patricia wasn't finished. She turned to Bradley, her expression stern. "Bradley, I'd like to speak with you privately. Now." As Bradley followed Patricia toward the back office, Tommy could hear fragments of their conversation, completely unprofessional, judged by appearance, "Could have cost us." While they talked, other members of the sales staff began approaching Tommy with newfound respect. They introduced themselves, offered him coffee, and began discussing the various options available for the Huracan. When Patricia returned, Bradley was notably absent. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, "I've spoken with our financing department, and they're prepared to expedite your purchase. If you'd like to proceed, we can have all the paperwork ready within the hour." Tommy nodded. "I'd appreciate that." As the paperwork process began, Tommy found himself surrounded by a completely different atmosphere. The same salespeople who had been whispering about him 20 minutes earlier were now eager to assist him, asking about his business, complimenting his success, and treating him with the deference typically reserved for their most valued customers. The transformation was both amusing and educational. Tommy realized that his experience was probably not unique, that countless people were judged every day based on their appearance, their accent, their perceived social status. Most of them didn't have the luxury of a bank account that could instantly change those perceptions. During the paperwork process, Patricia made small talk about Tommy's business. She seemed genuinely interested in how he had built Rodriguez Auto Solutions from nothing into a multi-million-dollar operation. It wasn't easy, Tommy admitted. The first few years were brutal. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping in the shop, eating nothing but ramen noodles. But I had a vision of what the company could become. What made you choose commercial vehicles? Patricia asked. Tommy smiled, because nobody else wanted to work on them. The jobs were dirty, the hours were long, and the profit margins were thin. But I realized that cities and companies were always going to need their vehicles maintained. If I could do it better and more efficiently than anyone else, I could build something lasting. As they talked, Tommy learned that Patricia had built her own path to success as well. She had started as a receptionist at a car dealership in Detroit and worked her way up through every department before eventually becoming a general manager. I understand what it's like to be underestimated, she said quietly. When I started in this business, there weren't many women in management positions. I had to prove myself every single day. When the paperwork was finally complete, Patricia personally walked Tommy through the final inspection of the Huracan. She explained every feature, every option, every detail of the car's construction and performance capabilities. Now, she said as they completed the inspection, about Bradley. Tommy looked at her curiously. What about him? His behavior today was unacceptable. I've spoken with him, and he understands that his attitude doesn't represent the values of Prestige Motors. He's been placed on probation, and he's required to complete sensitivity training. Tommy considered this for a moment. Patricia, I appreciate that you're taking this seriously, but I don't want Bradley to lose his job over this. Patricia looked surprised. You don't? No. Everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe this will be a learning experience for him. Patricia nodded slowly. You're more generous than I might be in the same situation. As they prepared to complete the transaction, Tommy's phone rang. It was his father. Dad, Tommy said, guess what? I'm about to drive home in a Lamborghini. The pride in his father's voice was unmistakable. Tommy, your mother and I always knew you'd make something of yourself. We just never imagined it would be this big. After the call ended, Patricia handed Tommy the keys to his new car. Mr. Rodriguez, it's been a privilege doing business with you. I hope you'll consider Prestige Motors for any future automotive needs. Tommy shook her hand. I will. And Patricia, thank you for treating me with respect, even when you had doubts. As Tommy prepared to leave, several of the salespeople gathered to watch him start up the Lamborghini for the first time. The engine roared to life with a sound that was both mechanical perfection and pure emotion, the culmination of decades of Italian engineering and Tommy's 20 years of hard work. But before he left, Tommy had one more thing to do. He spotted Bradley near the back of the showroom, clearly trying to avoid eye contact. Bradley, Tommy called out. Bradley approached reluctantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by obvious embarrassment. Mr. Rodriguez, I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was unprofessional and unfair. Tommy nodded. Apology accepted, but I want you to remember something. Bradley waited. You never know who's going to walk through that door, Tommy said. The person in the expensive suit might be maxed out on credit cards. The person in work clothes might own 3 businesses. Judge people by how they treat others, not by what they're wearing. Bradley nodded seriously. I understand. And Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for not demanding that I be fired. I know I would have deserved it. Tommy smiled. Everyone makes mistakes, Bradley. The question is what you learn from them. As Tommy finally drove out of the Prestige Motors lot in his new Lamborghini, he reflected on the morning's events. The car was everything he had dreamed it would be, fast, beautiful, and a tangible symbol of everything he had achieved. But more importantly, the experience had reminded him of something his father had taught him long ago. Success isn't just about what you accomplish, it's about how you treat people along the way. The drive home was pure joy. The Huracan handled like a dream, its engine responding to his touch with precision and power. Other drivers turned to look as he passed, some with admiration, some with envy, some simply with curiosity about the man behind the wheel of such an extraordinary machine. When Tommy pulled into the driveway of his modest home in East Los Angeles, a house he had bought with his first big business contract and never felt the need to replace, his parents were waiting outside. His father had tears in his eyes as he embraced his son. 20 years ago, his father said, "You told me you were going to buy a car like this someday. I believed in you, but I never imagined." Tommy looked at the Lamborghini sitting in his driveway, then at his parents, then at the small house where he had learned the values that made all of this possible. "Dad," he said, "the car is nice, but it's not the most important thing I've accomplished. The business, the people I employ, the services we provide, that's what really matters. This is just a symbol." His mother, who had been quietly proud throughout the entire journey, finally spoke up. "Tommy, we're proud of what you've built, but we're prouder of who you've become. You could have been bitter about how that salesman treated you, but instead you chose to be kind. That's worth more than any car." That evening, Tommy called his employees to share the news of his purchase, but instead of just celebrating, he announced that Rodriguez Auto Solutions would be establishing a scholarship fund for young people from working-class families who wanted to pursue careers in business or automotive technology. "I want other kids who grow up in garages to know that they can build something extraordinary," he told his team. "Not everyone will buy a Lamborghini, but everyone deserves the chance to chase their dreams." The story of Tommy's experience at Prestige Motors spread quickly through his community and beyond. Local news stations picked up the story, and it became a viral sensation on social media, a tale of perseverance, prejudice overcome, and the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect. Bradley, the salesman who had initially dismissed Tommy, became an unlikely beneficiary of the story's popularity. The sensitivity training he completed opened his eyes to his own biases, and he became one of the dealership's most successful salespeople by treating every customer with the same respect, regardless of their appearance. Patricia Whitman used the incident as a training opportunity for her entire staff, establishing new protocols to ensure that every customer received excellent service from the moment they walked through the door. And Tommy, he kept the Lamborghini for exactly 1 year before selling it and donating the proceeds to his scholarship fund. He had proven his point, achieved his dream, and learned something important about the difference between success and fulfillment. "The car was beautiful," he told a reporter who asked why he sold it, "but it was never really about the car. It was about proving to myself that I could achieve anything I set my mind to. Once I proved that, I realized there were more important things to do with the money." Today, Rodriguez Auto Solutions continue